One thing I'd like to ask is because with your music creating albums and licensing and whatnot, in general, you probably end up working with a lot of other musicians. And even if it's not for your song specifically, there's a lot of collaboration going on in your art field. How do you feel collaboration affects the music field specifically as opposed to maybe other art forms? Like, do you feel like it has certain hindrances you wish wasn't there? Or do you feel like there's certain strengths that you don't find in other art forms, like with collaboration in general in the music art form?
With music specifically, being able to communicate to another musician is definitely a challenge that I wasn't ready for when I was starting out with that, because I'm not exactly a formally trained musician. Even though I have taken some classes, I even have a certificate from Berkeley from doing online studies. My brain just naturally doesn't think theory first. I've always done everything by ear. So there's some good things and bad things to that, because I can pick up something immediately if I hear it, but at the same time, I'm not able to regurgitate that information to someone else. So there can be a bit of challenge of communicating that to other musicians, which is what I learned really quickly.
Of course.
So I definitely had to, like, it's still an ongoing process today. Like I still have to keep picking up on the way other musicians like communicate ideas to each other, and just like roll with the punches there, because for the most part as a musician, it doesn't seem like it, but I really don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, it's like working with two different languages, right?
Yeah.
Like if someone who goes entirely off of the senses or whatnot by hearing, or like even with cooking, some people go entirely off of tasting or looking and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And then there's another person who might have studied for a long time and learned this whole other kind of language. Both people might be able to make the exact same product, but just communicating it over can be difficult. I know I have a friend who my process of art creation is very much verbal. I very much explain everything in detail. I try to come up with specific vocabulary words and whatnot, and I try to explain things very clearly that way. What I found, though, is that a lot of other people I've worked with or encountered don't work exactly the same way. A lot of them is just like, okay, let me look at it. Okay, let me tweak that. That's better. And it's like, well, I could have spent a long time trying to figure out verbally or process exactly how it's going to be better. It's just interesting to see how people work differently. And I've run into a lot of like not creative problems. That's a little bit harsh of a word, but every kind of like bump in the road with another creator is oftentimes just being able to communicate the same idea to each other, but we're both communicating it differently. It's always interesting to see how artists work that way. But I know with music specifically, at least I imagine, I'm not a musician myself, so I don't want to pretend to know too much. But from what I imagine with music, it can be very difficult to also just communicate and work out specific parts of the song, because, songs are supposed to be one continuous thing. Have you had trouble with like specifically having maybe an instrumentalist do something or a vocalist do something when it's just not feeling like very cohesive between the song or between both your pieces or whatnot?
Yeah, that's something that definitely happens like throughout like any collaborative process. It doesn't really have to happen with music.
Right.
It's just a matter of being able to communicate like anything that's anything that stands out strangely, just being like, hey, this part of the song sounds weird. Or it's like, or I'm not hearing this right in this specific part because of this. You just have to be able to communicate that and then just work towards a solution together.
Right.
Like, maybe they have a side of the story to it. It's like, I did this because I thought it sounded good.
Right.
Or I did this because some music theory explanation that I can't understand. But
right.
Which happens sometimes, but you just have to make a decision from there. Either give the benefit of the doubt or just say like, hey, let's try something else. And if it doesn't work, we'll just go with this anyway. So that at least we know that we gave it a shot.
Right. And do you have like, are there like is there a project that ultimately fell through just through like either bad communication or creative differences or whatnot with regards to collaborations? And then do you also have like a project that you always think of like, wow, that's one of the best creative collaborations I've done? Like, do you have basically projects that fall through because of collaboration, basically?
Not exactly. The only reason why collaborations would have fallen through for me was just scheduling, really. Just like not being able to work out enough time to work on it. It's like I've even had to like drop offers because it didn't line up with my work schedule.
Right. Sure. Yeah. So, do you think ultimately, like, you've had a good experience with finding people, and I mean, I imagine a big part of it is just asking the right people too. I mean,
Yeah.
Sometimes you might see some red flags of like, okay, we creatively wouldn't work very well together, so I'm going to steer a different direction. And that probably is a big reason for why so many of yours are successful, right? Because you understand who you're talking to and whatnot.
Yeah. And when it comes to good collaborations too, like there's definitely some that like I still look back on and I'm just like, wow, that was just really solid. Like even though we've done a lot of music together, my favorites collaboration to this day is still it's a End of All Fire Emblem Fates cover that Julia and I did. Like for me, that still like hits right on the money. Runner up would have to be I think it was an Ace Attorney song. Oh yeah, Professor Layton versus Ace Attorney cover that I did with Austin Eruption, because that was my first time mixing, like properly mixing live drums, and especially in in online music creation, you don't really get that opportunity because not a lot of people have a living situation where they can even have a drum set in. So just to have that opportunity was a lot of fun.
Hey there. You just watched a clip from my creative podcast. If you'd like to check out the full episode, you can support me over on Patreon. And if not, you can subscribe to check out more clips coming here soon.